Now we're going to address a very common item type on the LSAT. It shows up several times on each test. Again, we're going to be using the June 2007 LSAT. It was published as a PDF file on lsac.org. You can download it if you'd like, but you can follow along. We're going to section 2, and we're going to question 1. Of course, we read the question first because we don't know why we're reading the passage. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the main conclusion of the economist argument? Well, that ought to be easy. Isn't it going to be at the conclusion of the passage? Last sentence says, often attempts to increase productivity decrease the number of employees, which clearly harms the dismissed employees, as well as the sense of security of retained employees. Then we can look down and answer E. Decreasing the number of employees in a business undermines the sense of security of retained employees. It said so right down at the bottom of the passage. Would that be much of a test? Well, maybe it's the first sentence of the passage. Every business strives to increase its productivity, for this increases profits for the owners and the likelihood that the business will survive. Well, we can do a little logical reasoning if we want, and we could look at answer D, because that says there is no business that does not make efforts to increase its productivity, and the first sentence said every business strives to increase its productivity. But is that the conclusion of the passage? There's a middle sentence, and it says, but not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the business as a whole. That's our conclusion. It's right in the middle. And the nerds wanted to see if we could figure that out. It's not the beginning, it's not at the end, it's in the middle. Good. You get half a point on your future for the LSAT. So you look at answer B. Some measures taken by a business to increase productivity fail to be beneficial to the business as a whole. That's exactly what the second sentence said. But not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial to the businesses as a whole. So we're actually better off by reading less of the passage. Because if we only read the conclusion, we're not going to be attracted to answers D or E, which are about the first sentence of the passage and the last sentence of the passage. We only read the middle sentence of the passage because that's what we want to do, is read as little as possible and be logical about what we're finding. Notice what a nice word answer B began with. It began with some. Answer C says only. That's an extreme word. Only is the loneliest word in the world on the LSAT. Only if employees of a business are also its owners will the interest of its employees and owners coincide, enabling measures that will be beneficial to the business as a whole. What does that sound like? Sounds like a cooperative. Sounds a little socialist, doesn't it? Maybe communist. Does that sound like the law school admission test? Look at answer A. If action taken to secure the survival of business fails to enhance the welfare of its business's employees, that action cannot be good for the business as a whole. Answers A and C are looked at from the point of view of the employees, aren't they? Answer B says some measures taken by a business to increase productivity fail to be beneficial to the business as a whole. We want to be on the top. We want to look at it from the point of view of the management, not the employees. But when it comes to looking for the main point of the passage, we call this the pin the tail on the donkey question. Because it's not going to be at the top, it's not going to be at the bottom. I say I can find that with my eyes closed. You can blindfold me and I'll tell you to find the transitional word in the 4th or 5th line. And then we realized the best way to pin the tail on the donkey is to find the butt first. Now we can take advantage of what we learned about looking for the main conclusion of the passage when we get to section 3 of the July 2007 LSAT, question 12. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the conclusion drawn in the argument? Sure enough, line 4, transitional word. It's not a but, it's a however. However, it is more likely that the similarity of theme and situations in the two novels is merely coincidental. Let's read as little as we can, and let's find our answer just by reading that little part. And the only answer that talks anything at all about being coincidental is answer D. It says it is less likely that one of the authors of the novel X or novel Y is guilty of plagiarism than that the similarity of themes and situations in the two novels is merely coincidental. That's our answer. But of course, the nerds had to come up with 4 wrong answers. What did they do? They used the same game they did on question 1. Look at the bottom of the passage. It says, since both authors are from very similar backgrounds and have led similar lives. Well, we know that's not going to be the conclusion. It's not the game that they're playing. And it begins with since. Since is going to introduce evidence. It's not going to introduce a conclusion. But if we're talking about answers about very similar backgrounds and have led similar lives, we could look at answer C. The author of novel X and the author of novel Y are from very similar backgrounds and have led very similar lives. That's the same trap. But then answer E gets even more elaborate. It says if the authors of novel X and novel Y are from very similar backgrounds and have led similar lives, suspicions that either of the authors plagiarized are very likely to be unwarranted. That can get even more attractive if you've read the bottom of the passage. Look at the top of the passage. Novel X and novel Y are both semi-autographical novels and contain many of the very similar themes and situations. Well, we've already found the conclusion, so we know that this top sentence is not the conclusion. Well, answer A says novel X and novel Y are both semi-autographical novels, and the two novels contain many very similar themes and situations. That's right out of the first 3 lines. That's a trap. But then answer B gets even more elaborate. It says the fact that novel X and novel Y are both semi-autographical novels and contain many of the very similar themes and situations might lead one to suspect that plagiarism on the part of one of the authors. And that includes the entire first sentence. So we're better off by reading less, looking for the but in the middle of the passage, and looking for the end of the conclusion in answer D. Your friends tell nobody about the 4 wrong answers because nobody cares. Now we can apply what we've learned about finding the main point of the passage on a question that doesn't quite fit the structure that we found before. With section 2, question 10, which of the following most accurately expresses the main conclusion of the argument? This time they didn't give us 3 sentences. They only gave us 2. Which sentence do you think is the conclusion? The concluding one or the first one? Lucky guess. The first sentence says double-blind techniques should be used whenever possible in scientific experimentation. Should tells you what the author thinks. If we look for the answer right away, it says it is advisable for scientists to use double-blind techniques in as high a proportion of their experiments as they can. Answer E is the only one that's really close. It says double-blind experiments are often effective ways of ensuring scientific objectivity, but it doesn't have any should in there, the way answer B says it is advisable for the scientist to use it. But of course your friends want to tell nobody about the wrong answers and they want to read the entire passage, so why don't we? Of course nobody cares about that, so we can either tell nobody about the wrong answers or we can read as little as possible and find the main conclusion of the passage. Testing for the public, nonprofit since 1985. No one makes things easier.